Okay. Um, I'm going to show a video first, and then I'll explain why. Making presentations like this is always really scary because I didn't know Heido would be here. It's a work by Heino Smith from Nassau. And I thought I'd start with that because it indicates sort of like the landscape and the problematics around understanding something about the Caribbean. Why I say that is that this work came from a residency that Heino did in Port of Spain at Alice Yard. It was, he was looking at a sort of in the one of the popular districts of Port of Spain, there was a guy that was balancing bottles outside a bar to, get money. He was an addict or something. And Heino, on his trip to Port of Spain, became fascinated by this feat, of balancing bottles to get money, a kind of magic trick, that kind of, while people are fetting and having a good time, they give him a little something on the side. Heino was invited to show in the Liverpool Biennial, and he was kind of worried about the whole thing. I think we had conversations about it. So he tried to master that feat. And he went up to London. I think he produced it in Blue Curry's studio, not so? Right. And then the piece got to the Liverpool Biennial. Nobody really paid much attention to it, but it was there. What it said was, and I mean, I'm saying that with a very specific intention, not to diminish the value of the work, which I think is a very important work, is that it kind of fell into this weird zone because he's talking about that magic trick, that kind of the predicament of the artist, the predicament of the Caribbean practitioner, negotiating in a field of expectations in which nobody expects something from him. And then he does this trick, and then it's opening up a can of worms. Where is this? How do we locate this work? Where was it produced? What is the field? It's being produced in that Atlantic conversation that we just was just referred to. But that wasn't necessarily the intention of how he was made visible, because he was supposed to be from somewhere, and the work had to have these particular characteristics. And it didn't provide any of that. However, for people who come from the Caribbean, we know that magic trick, right? We see it in the hotel every night, the limbo man, the this, the that. But it just didn't have any of the outer attributes. And I think in some ways, this has been a long conversation that when I left the Caribbean in the early 80s to go to art college to study art formally, these things were troubling me. So what I thought I would do is just, they've impacted on my own practice, of course, and it's impacted on some of the challenges that I'm faced with when I embark on that weird thing, which is I'm an artist, but I I'm always interested in the DNA of why I make certain decisions or what I'm responding to. And so I kind of, my work, both as a curator, as an artist, kind of begins in that zone of encounter with a gesture that troubles me. And then I try to figure it out. So I've been trying to figure, I'll start with one of the works, the first works that, right, oh, it's there, oh, wow. This is a work that I saw in 1981. I curated it in a show called 1981 in 2003. It's called the Caribbean Basin. And it was done by an artist called Johnny Stallmeyer, and a Trinidadian artist. And it was shown in a gallery in Port of Spain. It was just thrown on the ground. And the show was called The Counterfeit. So I'm doing something weird. I'm pulling this work out of a larger field. But at the time, I had not gone to college in the States. I hadn't really studied art formally. The piece just really freaked me out, and it has stayed with me for years. It's just a typical basin that you buy in a haberdashery. But the artist was responding to something. Reagan was visiting the Caribbean. There's the Caribbean Basin Initiative. So if you look at it very carefully, it's just an enamel basin. It has 3 rusty spots in it. He put the piece in nature and put a chemical so that it would rust. And it became, it couldn't hold water, right? He painted the red thing. It's red, white, and blue, the circle around the region. And it has 3 holes, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Grenada. So he's saying it just can't hold water. And it's talking about that moment, right? So it has a kind of an awareness. And what I'm interested in a lot of my work is, well, this work happened. Again, it's in this problematic of visibility, because if you do a kind of horizontal line across the hemisphere, a lot of artists in Mexico and this are kind of negotiating with these questions. This is the era of counterinsurgency. This is the era when Jamaica had more CIA agents assigned to it than the East Bloc. Nobody's, and what was ironic about this work was that the artists, most people said this work is American imperialism, it's conceptual. The art aficionados in the island at the time. Because Johnny is coming from a kind of colonial family, he'd studied in Canada, he comes home. But one of the most remarkable ironies about this work is that Johnny actually went in the bush and was living with Mother Earth, a Rastafarian cult. Rastafarianism had spread through the Caribbean. And they were, I think, following Brother Emmanuel or something, I can't remember. And when in the bush, he had this vision, a burst of light. So here you have this very early conceptual work that's coming from a Rastafarian vision. Now, when we think of Rastafari, we think of, kind of old guy joking wood, not the Bob Marley side of it, the intuitive. But no, this is the conceptual. So this work produced an awareness. And that was very troubling to me in terms of how to deal with this. So this is not an original photo from that installation. Johnny went on to Canada for years. He was in a depression. He had all kinds of personal problems. And then he came back to Trinidad in 1991. And I was troubled by that piece, so I went to look for him. And I said, do you have that show? And it was all in boxes. And I tried to convince him to show it again in 1991 or 92, but he said he had to do something to it. So what he did was he chewed chewing gum and stuffed Grenada and stuffed Nicaragua. And I said, why the chewing gum? And he said, that's what happens when the GIs move in, And so there's a kind of a narrative that has interested me between the kind of, yesterday we talked about the carnivalesque. This is another work. When I left Trinidad, this was in the DNA of my consciousness, and I curated another show right after the 1981 show called Objects and Actions, where I tried to figure out how do objects and actions have equal agency in the social space. This was a performance piece, not an individual performer. This is a kind of instigated work, mass spectacle. But it's talking about, it's called Man Crab, and it's talking about, it fuses things that you would die for in another country, right? It's playing on the Islamic festival, Shia Islamic festival of Hussein. That's called what? It's called something, Ashura, right? In Trinidad it's called Hussein. It's Pagua, you know, so this upturned crab, which in the artist's mind is a kind of idea of masculinity and rapaciousness. And, you know, he said this is like the silo on the riverbank. So it's got an ecological, mythological, you know, it's at that juncture. And if a work like, at the time, I said to myself, just like the other work, if a work like this had happened in Paris or London, you know, you'd read about it in art forum. But these works happened and nobody cared. 5,000 people in the stands. You know, the world wasn't as connected when these kinds of things were happening in Trinidad. And people's idea of carnival is not dealt with in terms of its original history of protest and satire and a kind of political consciousness, right? This was another version of the piece done years later when I talked about it. It was in the Havana Biennial in 2000 as the Dance of the Cloths, which he did under Columbus's statue. So what happens is basically these guys have pumps hidden in their backpacks, and as they dance and sway, this blood-like liquid shoots up in the air and falls onto this white cloth, right? So all kinds of implications to this. Another piece from that very same period was a piece by an artist called Wendy Nanan from Trinidad. And this is a wedding between La Divina de Pastora and Lord Krishna. Because there is a statue in the south of Trinidad called La Divina de Pastora, where a black Madonna is mistaken for Kali, or a Madonna. So, and a lot of her work, she was very interested in folk forms, so she played around with papier-mâché and stuff like that. And she did this weird thing where in the Hindu wedding, when the garland is placed, that's just the moment, Krishna looks a bit randy, and the Madonna looks a little horrified. You know, so it's talking about cultural, you know, sort of syncretic, the challenges within syncretic culture. So, and this last piece from this series is a little known piece called Box Piece. Oh, you think it's better? Okay, gosh. Microphones make me really nervous, you know. Should I just go, sorry, they really do. I'm going to go blank, right?
Yeah, but the people that are on the stage, Chris,
oh, you can't? Oh, okay, sorry. For what this piece called Box Piece, yeah, I'm going to have to recover. Okay, microphone. Okay, sorry. Anna Serrao, done in this piece was started in England and finalized in Port of Spain. And shown in the late 80s, early 90s. And she took newspapers, compressed them, and made compressed board from daily newspapers. And then, inside of it, she placed stratified rock. So she brings up this dichotomy between geological time and sort of human time. So there's kind of first conversations around ecology and social kind of concerns. And the piece was called Mortar and Pestle. So it opens up a kind of, so she has two titles. Sometimes she calls it Mortar and Pestle, sometimes she calls it Box Piece. But it kind of implies that kind of split of consciousness between a geological awareness and a historical, you know, awareness of our reality. Okay, actually, this is the juggle of the juggle now. Okay. I'm going to sweep through this quickly. These are earlier artists that I'm interested in. This is a very famous mural from Trinidad. It was commissioned for independence in 1962, so it's a nationalist work. And it was bulldozed in a minor renovation in 1977, and the politician said it was getting in the way of progress. And why I'm dragging you through these pieces, this is a folklore drawing done in the 50s by an illustrator. And it kind of illustrates the national folklore, you know, the creatures of the plantation imagination. But another artist did the painting over, so it's almost like that relationship between Picasso and Velázquez, you know, and in our context. But what's happening here is that it becomes a political nightmare of the 60s and 70s. But what's interesting about this piece is that he was the first or second artist in residence at the Studio Museum. All right, I discovered that talking to Laurie Sims and Mel Edwards and people like that. Then he returns to the Caribbean. And he literally returns to the Caribbean. Right? Most people have never seen this. They think it's some work by Mata or somebody you didn't know about, right? Related. But it's a large, spectacular work. And it was his response, in a way, to the destruction of that mural, right? And so there's a kind of a narrative going on there. Then I'm going to make a big jump to works by other artists, like the piece I showed at the beginning, like Marlon Griffith. Artists that Claire's worked with extensively, very interested in the performative. But he shifts between an idea of the performative in actual performance in space to something that I'm interested in as well, which is the document of performativity, right? In a sense, a photograph is a performative kind of gesture in space. You know, when the camera points at you, that tension that many other people writing about photography. What's fascinating is there's a habit in the Caribbean of schoolgirls powdering their chest. It's a kind of bad girl, rough street girl kind of thing, right? You don't know if it came from the French courts or something, you know, but they're still doing it. If you go to Port of Spain, Jamaica, Grenada, Guyana, tomorrow you will see schoolgirls, and as soon as they bathe and they put on clothes, whack. You know? So what he decided to do was all these bling patterns, Louis Vuitton and so on, he made templates so they could do it in a blingy way, you know, and it talks about the consumption and this, you know. And just to kind of stay in the conversation, this is a piece by Teresa Marta from Curacao called Silent Witness. It's like potty training with bullets, you know. So there's a kind of a thread that these works are influencing and talking to each other. And to me, these are wonderful platforms for curatorial interest. This piece is very recent. I just saw it. It's by Nikolai Noel, a young artist in Port of Spain. What he did is, with all the murders that are going on, people have a habit in the working class areas of lighting these candles on the streets that lead up to someone's house when they have prayer nights. So what he did is he's been going and collecting all the wax and making these weird triangles. And he has this whole, so these things are actually the candle waxes of people's memorials, right? And people have been kind of threatening him because they think, what are you doing, Obia or something? Why do you want this wax, you know? I won't go into the cosmological things, and of course other works like this, you know, like the Scholarship Boy. And so I've been working with a lot of young artists who are experimenting with new ways, modes of production. This piece is one from, I'm getting to kind of where we are now that I really enjoy. I'll explain later, but just have a look. I mean, literally, oil barrels and crates. So oil money and import culture, right? Import consumer culture. You know, a young woman that stamps these pornographic images into the dollar bill. So talk about the exchange value, you know, of women's bodies and so on. Marcel Piñas, you know, down. So there's a kind of range of gestures that I won't spend too much time. How are I doing for time? Halfway? This is where I wanted to be. Out of breath, yeah. So these things have kind of, that trouble me, are what inform my sort of approach to when a challenge, maybe somebody wants me to do a show, or maybe I have an idea and I just want to try it out. How do these works speak to each other? What kind of awareness do they produce in that dialogue? So it's very much a kind of dialogic sort of encounter. So in 2006, and I'm kind of heading into the kind of problems of what Sean and myself are involved in at Alice Yard, we had a project called Galvanize, and we thought doing this project, we wanted to take work out into the public domain. To not say we don't have a space, to kind of, so we had people showing in tattoo parlors, on the street. And there were a lot of things that we had instigated in collaboration with the artists. This is a show I did in collaboration with O'Neill. I went to Kingston. I noticed that there was a interest in digital photography rising in the Caribbean because digital cameras are, everywhere, and people can create an image. And I thought it kind of funny, this notion of being shot in Kingston, which is like, so and then the problem was we were not interested in shipping original photographs. This whole show could be just emailed, and then we run and print it, and then we had the flexibility of printing it in relation to the space. It's not, so there was a kind of thing where everything was flexible. So that's kind of one approach. And then that moved on to something I just talked about with the Objects in Action show, which is the performative moment. I began to become interested in the document of performance and performance itself. And that launched into a whole experiment. This is James Cooper. I think he called these temporary sculptures, where he kind of walked around on the beach and picked up, a tide box, anything that floated up on the beach, and connected it to somebody's head and took a photo of them, right? I think it was mostly his children, and he connected them to these motorcycle helmets because there was something about crime on motorcycle helmets or some weird shit. I can't remember, right? But I just liked the image. And then the idea of putting this up facing the street so people are like, what the ass, is like set up all kinds of really fascinating dialogues. Diraj Ramsamoj coming and wanted to be in this thing that he called the Caribbean Man, and then he posed as monuments. I always liked this spot because this was where the statue of Lord Harris was in Port of Spain. And in the 1970 revolution, the schoolgirls poured black paint on Lord Harris because he was a brutish governor. And he stayed for years with black paint. They paid money and restored him. And then what happened, he looked like a toy, like a plastic toy. He was so badly restored. And then somewhere in the 90s, there was a drag queen ball. And one of the drag queens in the middle of the night decided to jump and whine on him. And it was something ridiculous. These mythologies are great. Anyhow, he fell and broke. And if that's not bad enough, drug addicts and vagrants went off with his parts to sell them to Chinese smelters, right? And then the museum had to intervene and try and steal the parts back. And then so now he's in a vault because who's going to raise the money to kind of put him back together again? So we were having a lot of fun choosing these different sites, right? This is Charles Campbell. He built this geodesic dome, and so all these projects came up in the performative movement. People running down the road, people think we're mad as hell. Out to the yard, we built, and then there was these weird things. This is Actor Boy. Charles is Actor Boy. It's a famous Belisario image next to his dome with people being delivered to the slave ships, and then this thing. It just got out of control, right? One of the projects that came out of this that eventually fed into Claire's mass project that was shown here was Ebony Patterson's project, when she came and she did this project 9 of 219 in the performative moment, and because she decided she'd make a coffin for everyone that was shot for the length of time she would be there. And these are people making the coffin with Ebony. And then we took them in the empty lot next door to take a photograph, and all hell broke loose. Somebody called the mayor. They thought you were doing obia. I kid you not, police came. It was madness. And we kind of set up the audience. People came the night, and all the coffins were there. We are in the bistro district, where people come and party and live large, and on the oil money. And we asked the audience to walk around the block carrying the coffins through the bistro district. Then that's when the police came. But we had lawyers with us, so we said to them, once we're on the pavement, they can't really arrest us or stop us. And the thing was, it was kind of puzzling. So when the police came, he said, well, we're just moving them from here to there. You're allowed to move furniture and things, but coffins are very problematic. So I have done, the projects I've done, they're kind of small projects where they're really startups for bigger ideas that people could take up, because LSTR is not a museum or institution, So they're kind of research questions, is how I see it. Proximities was a project I did in which I tried to, I got different artists from the Spanish-speaking Caribbean and the continent to videos that bring up issues. This piece I always like, and I think I got this through Rosie. Right, Diana Sophia. And this piece was called Ways of Making Love in the US, where she basically is hugging up different guys and talking about all the spicy food she's ever eaten. And it just goes on and on. It's like a grocery list. She almost seems bored. And then this one by Ivan Monforte, where he listens to this very sad, plaintive song and tries to make himself cry. I think I saw that piece at the Museo del Barrio. And so what I do is I just see things and I put them together to see what kind of discourses would come up. And sometimes people have a lot of fun and they send me the work, So this was one, what's that song called? La Mala. So that's a Sandro Vivas video where they're singing La Mala, but they change it into a rap song and changing it into feminist lyrics, The second Proximities was a survey of contemporary Cuban work. I always like this piece by Glenda Leon, where she scrapes the US dollar bill and then snorts it. That's really creepy. And I saw it in New York, and it was up at Lemon College or something in a show on contemporary Cuban work, and I saw it and thought, can I have it for this project? And I did it. And then I get to where I'm closing off. This kind of incidental sculpture where you just put these combs together. So we're still in the magic trick world, right? See the smart man politics, right? But it's, I've always enjoyed something about blues work in the sense that the titles are descriptive. And so, it says it's 4 combs, right? And you kind of have to, but then of course these objects, you can buy them or anywhere in the kind of cheap haberdasheries that you get in all third world countries or ethnic districts, And there's something going on, with Hugh's work, Ebony's work, whether it looks very Baroque or whether it's very, sort of more sort of graphically constructed in a way. But it's the same transformation of these materials, whether you use the Arthur Danto approach or whether it is the Chickster approach, or maybe they're both the same. So, but the transformation of the commonplace as it manifests in our world, ways of working. I'm not making a claim, mind you, that we have any distinctive attributes in that regard. So we did this project called Out of Place, and it was a lot of fun. We just asked artists, just like the project that Bubu Negron did with Pablo. We put out a call, asked people to send us ideas, and then of course I'm thinking about the other guy, the duet guy, right? Can't remember his name, sorry. So I always like this particular version because it's outside the museum. It's outside the National Museum. So if you don't have time to go into the National Museum, you can go and get a Blue Curry special. So what Blue did is we went to different people selling things around the city and said, you will design a special version and we will put it online and you'll put up the sign, Blue Curry special today, $7. And there was I forgot the photo of the Blue Curry special, sorry. You can ask Blue to let you see what a Blue Curry snow cone looks like. It's a snow cone, the ice thing. But what was freaking me out is that it was outside the museum. So you didn't even have to go into the museum if you want to have an experience. That's the sign. And the sign was done by a sign painter that we've been working with different artists. And there were different projects. I won't go through all. This was James Cooper suggested that we go in color charts and look for colors that mention Bermuda or Nassau and then mix them together, right? So he went and bought Bermuda something and, and Bahamas something. And then this is just an installation. This piece is up in the new space that we're developing now at Gramercy, where Al Braffett, an artist from England, was writing down everything he saw written on cars. Guys write on the back of cars. So he's created an inventory of everything he's seen written on the cars, and then he sent it to us to blow up, using the same sign painter. And I don't know if it's a quote from a trap song, from a dancehall song. I have to research and find out. This has literally just been done. And it was part of the Outer Place project that we worked on together. This is Kellyanne Lindo she did a residency at the Yard, even though it wasn't formally part of the project, but it happened in the spirit of the project. A lot of her work dealt with this barrel culture, the relationship between children that are left behind. So she wanted to have this kind of tunnel where you talk to her through this tunnel, through the barrel. So we had to collect barrels and suspend it. And this piece has now evolved. I think it's in the biennial in Kingston. I just came from there and saw it. And it's very much a startup project, but who knows where it will go and how it will develop spatially. And I'm going to close off. There are many other projects, but how do you have the time? Yes, so I'll just run through some pictures of different projects, how people use the space at Alice Yard. And one of the things I want to close off with is, in all of these projects, whether I've done them in institutions or just kind of in the yard or in the public space, one of the challenges I think in the Caribbean is all of these projects that were listed by Sarah, they often happen out of the region because we don't have the resources to do these bonanzas, And one of the things we've thought about is, what if we had online access? So when I was doing Wrestling with the Image, one of the things I insisted on was that we do a PDF that somebody could download on the evening of the opening. And why that was, if you look at that catalog, you will see actual installation shots, because we can work right down to the wire, And what was creepy about that show was that in the first 3 or 4 days, like 20,000 people downloaded the catalog. So the server crashed. Why was that? Well, if you spend 100,000, you print a catalog, you print 1,500 copies, you take 5 years to mail them all over the place. So it's kind of interesting. And they usually have documentation of the work that's a year old, right? So I was trying to find ways to, one, make these dialogues available and accessible, and keep them in touch, which is a different kind of problem, in terms of a research problem. Because this is about just putting things out, getting it out, right? So these are one of the artists he worked with is Richard Rollins. He has this thing called the Draconian Switch. And I've put him in touch with a number of people curating projects, not just wrestling, where he produces these things so that these are the actual catalogs for all these shows. And they're done on the spot and they go out and they're accessible. What has been interesting is that some of the catalogs now, in hindsight, people want to print them. Like they're printed, I saw versions of the Rockstone and Boot Hill. So it provides another rationalization because, of course, libraries and archives are not absolutely comfortable with the digital. So, what I just want to close off and say that I feel a bit kind of, I'm an artist, yes. I've played around with curatorial ideas, but they really come from a direct encounter with the work and with the ideas in the work. I'm not so... And as we follow these shows, because I was going to talk a little bit about the different shows, but I think they were well listed by Sarah, they come and go every couple of years. And the question is, how do these large kind of projects, the degree toward which the people who do them, how deeply do they talk to the artists on the floor, in the region, where the idea comes out of the practice? and less out of a kind of big picture, like you say, I'm going to do something on horizons, and then you come to the Caribbean and say, you can do the horizon thing, And there are many shows like that that pop up every couple of years. I mean, and for me as an artist, it's very tricky because I have to negotiate with these things as well. So, jumping from being curator to artist is a very tricky thing because, the artists are watching me with suspicion, but then I'm also having that outer body experience where I've been on either side. So the boundaries of discretion or behavior is a very complicated thing. But, and then sometimes there's just the issue of the artist saying, yes, I want to be in this project because they're kind of worried about visibility as well. But then, for example, with a show to stop, there's also shows that you can be in that you can learn a lot. And when I was in Afro-Modern, I was very confused to be in that show because within the Caribbean, people don't see me within the sort of black nationalist Afrocentric narrative. Being a mixed person and the kind of local petty politics, I'm always navigating on the edge of that. So the artist with the big sort of Wilfredo Lam work is a guy who would beat his chest and say, I should be there, right? And in truth, he should, because he's an you could call his painting Atlantic painting. It's in that triangle. He left Trinidad, he went to New York, he met Cozier and Skunda, it's a whole kind of dialogue. But what's interesting is that I didn't see my work in that context. And being in the exhibition, walking around, it opened up a whole other reading for, what I might have been doing or thinking. And then on the other side, you could also be in shows where you feel like a featherweight boxer, bobbing and weaving, So with that said, I think these are the questions that I think would be really exciting for curatorial exchanges and dialogues, So this is my little kind of, question. And it came from Caribbean Basin, and the question continues. So that's why I got so excited when I saw Heino's work when he did it, because I kind of saw this loop between something 30 years ago and then now. And I think it's still playing out. And it's not limited to Caribbean artists. But what excites me now is how would we draw a kind of line across the hemisphere to understand how all these, to get some of those artists under the same sun out of the shade.